Thanks. So here we're going to be talking about clustering Hyper-V, and I'm going to be discussing everything around it, and I'm going to show you how to do this from scratch as much as I can in the time that I have. Of course, a lot of what I do is going to kind of go really fast, but you will have a way to review this by means of looking at the recorded session later. So let me get going here. So what I have here is the setup that I have right now. I have every box of mine is a Windows Server 2012. These two boxes here, host 1 and host 2, are Windows Server 2012 machines. And then I have my domain controller, which is a Windows Server 2012 R2. Well, for no particular reason. It did not have to be a Windows Server 2012 R2. It just so happens that I had an R2 machine available. That's all. The domain controller is called class.edu, and it will serve as a iSCSI target server, which is essentially, for our purposes here, a storage server. The LUNs, the logical unit numbers, if you will, for the cluster will reside on the DC. Not exactly the ideal approach, but for the purposes of my demonstration, it will do what we need to do perfectly okay. I have two network cards in each one of these hosts. In each of these hosts, I have two network cards, and these two NICs each point to a different network, or a different subnet, if you will. The one network card points to the 192 network, and the other one points to a 10 dot network. The 10 dot network is going to be the one that's going to serve as a cluster redundancy traffic. Hyper-V cluster is really a failover cluster, to tell you the truth. It is a Microsoft failover cluster on a server that happens to have the Hyper-V role. Okay. So the failover cluster will use the 10 dot address as its redundancy traffic. It requires it, a dedicated NIC for that. And the 192 network is going to be the one that will contain our VM traffic. Failover network also requires that the machine be on a domain controller. Hyper-V doesn't require that, okay, but failover cluster does. With a Hyper-V machine, it doesn't have to be inside of a domain controller at all. It helps a great deal from a management perspective if it is. Okay. You can easily deploy a Hyper-V machine as part of your managed virtualization structure by putting it in a perimeter network. I'll show you what I mean by that shortly. So one of the first things that I need to do is I need to configure this target server. I need to present some LUNs. I need to present some LUNs, and I need to make it available I need to make those LUNs available to host 01 and host 02. Okay. I want to share one more thing with you. I've got another machine that I'm setting up, a third server. I'm going to call this one host 03. And the reason I'm putting this together, really, is to show you what I did on the first two servers from scratch. And the first two servers are already constructed, so I want to show you what I did in them from scratch. And the best way to do that, well, is to show you what I did from scratch. So this is a Windows Server 2012 R1, not R2 machine that I just created. This is a physical Dell PowerEdge 1950. This particular server, the physical hardware, has 4 gigs of RAM, two 73 gig disk drives in it, and the physical box is about 7 years old, so it's a little dated. It is 64-bit. It supports 64-bit because Windows Server 2012 is a 64-bit OS, but the physical servers are rather dated, but they work perfectly fine for what I am trying to accomplish. I have other servers that I've already created, host 1 and host 2. This one is going to serve as host 3. Here it is restarting again. And to tell you about my other boxes, here is my, I'm using Remote Desktop Connection Manager. If you have not used this tool, download it from Microsoft. RDCM is really awesome. Has a lot more features. So this machine right here is my domain controller. And as you can see, here is my Active Directory domain that it's telling me about. This machine over here is host 01. And this machine over here is host 02. Okay. Let me go back to my other box that is booting. And as soon as it boots, I'm going to log into the box and make it available for remote connection. I'll remote desktop into the box and show you how I do the rest. Here's really the reason why I want to show you. Majority of the tasks that I perform in Windows Server 2012 and 08 actually are command line. I'm a big fan of command line. It's primarily because I'm very accustomed to programming and coding. I have been for some time. So I'm going to be doing things at the command line that you would do using the graphical interface. So you'll see what I mean very, very soon, assigning IP addresses and such. You'll see in a minute. And on the DC side, I want to show this to you. In the roles and features, I have installed file and storage services, file and iSCSI services. I have installed iSCSI target server right here on the domain controller. Okay. I have also installed from features, I have installed, where did it go? Windows Standards Based Storage Management. This is all part and included in Windows Server 2012. And if you look in Tools, you will not find a way to manage the iSCSI target server. There's the iSCSI initiator, but there's no way to manage the iSCSI target server. iSCSI initiator will help you connect to iSCSI devices. The way to gain access to the iSCSI target server is through this file and storage services, and then clicking on iSCSI. Okay. So I don't have any disks created just yet. So I'm going to create a disk that I'm going to make available through iSCSI. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to call this thing, Disk01. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to make this disk 40 gig, dynamically expanding, and I'm going to click Next. I'm going to create a new iSCSI target, and I'm going to call this thing Target01. And I'm going to click Next, click Add, specify the IP addresses of the hosts that are going to be connecting to this 1.42, and the other one will be, this is for security purposes, 192.168.1.52. These are the two servers that will be connecting to it. I don't know why I said 142. It's 42. Try that again. Enter IQN, IP address 192.168.1.42, not 142. Click OK. Click Next. Click Next. Actually, add. I'm going to make the next server 62. 192.168.1.62. Click OK. Click next, click next. CHAP is for authentication. I'm not going to worry about that. Click next and click create. And it's creating my iSCSI target. There it is. It's done. And I'm going to create a couple of more targets. Right click, new iSCSI virtual disk. Click next. Disco 2. Make this one 1 gig. Next. And make that my quorum disk for the target. I'm going to call this thing quorum 01. I'm going to add the IP addresses of my 3 boxes. .42, add IP address 52, and I'm going to add the IP address of 62. There we go. Oops. 62. Click OK. Click next. Click next. Click create. I'm going to make one more disk. New iSCSI disk. Next. Disco 2. Disco 3. Okay, okay. Next. Dynamically expanding, 20 gig. Next. New target. Next. Target 02. Next. Add IP address for the host that will be coming in. 52. 42. And finally 62. Next, next, create. All right, all done. Close. And let's see where my other server's at. Here we go. And in this case, I'm going to log in to this box. This is my brand new server that I haven't done anything with just yet. I need to assign it an IP address and give it a name and all that stuff. Let me do that. I also need to set some firewall policies. And insert it into the domain and all those things. So I'm going to basically make it available remotely to me just first. So here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to do, let me make this thing a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm doing. It's really too small. Change the font to that, and make it a little bit bigger. Click OK. All right. And I'm going to do netsh interface IPv4 show interface. And I have 2 NICs in here. That's a loopback, but I've got Ethernet and Ethernet 2. So I'm going to do net, and right now the IP addresses are assigned by my, as you can see, 188 and 189. They're assigned by my DHCP server. Of course, I don't want that. So I'm going to do netsh int IPv4 set address Ethernet, which is the name of the interface, static 192.168.1.62. My subnet mask 0 192.168.1.12, which is my DC. Do netsh interface IPv4 set address Ethernet 2 static 10.10.10.40 255.255.255.0. That's the end of that. netsh int IPv4 add DNS servers Ethernet 192.168.1.12 index of 1, and that's adding my DNS servers. Come on, come on. As soon as it adds my DNS server, I'm going to try and ping my domain. There it is by name, so that works. I know DNS server is working. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to see the host name. See that goofy name? I'm going to do netdom, rename computer, new name host03. Oops. New, rename computer, computer name. Yes. Okay. So I just renamed the computer. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do system properties remote, enable remote desktop, just like that. You probably never do things this way. I'm going to PowerShell. Then I'm going to do set net firewall rule, display group file and printer sharing. Let me show you what this is going to do. Right now, when I ping 192.168.1.62, I can't ping it. Notice that? It's because firewall is denying it. So I'm going to do enable this true. And once I do that, as soon as it gets done, there you go. Now when I try to ping it, it works. Right? Go back here. I'm going to change the firewall rule over here to remote desktop so that I can remote desktop in. Exit out of this, exit out of this, close this, exit out of here. Go to my remote desktop connection. Select a new server, 192.168.1.62, and right click and connect, and use another account, administrator, and here I am. Ta-da! Okay, then I'm going to go to server manager on 62, go to local server, click on, now the reason the name's not different is because I haven't restarted the machine just yet. I'm going to go to enhanced security, turn this thing off, right there. All right. And I'm going to restart this machine. And there you go, restarting that box. Okay, while that's going on, I'm going to go to my host 01, which is this box, and I'm going to go to Server Manager. And in Server Manager, I'm going to connect my shared storage that I created using the iSCSI initiator right here. So you say yes to run that service. Oops. There you go. So there's a service. I'm going to put in the IP address of my target server. Quick connect. Saying, all right, here I've got the 3 disks. I'm going to connect that one, connect this one, and connect that one, and click Done, and click OK. What is that going to do? Well, when I go to, close that, when I go to Computer Management, as soon as it opens, and I go to Disk Management, right here, you will notice that as soon as this thing comes up, that I will have 3 disks that are not initialized right here. Okay. So the first one is 1 gig, the second one is 40 gig, and the third one is 20 gig. This right here is my, the D drive is my DVD that I have in there. That's what that is, so ignore that. So I'm going to right-click over here and bring it online, right-click, initialize it, click OK, bring this disk online, bring this disk online and initialize it, bring this one online, initialize it, and format it so that it's completely formatted, And then what I have to do to make it available to the cluster is I have to bring it offline. I have to format it, not assign a drive letter to it. I have to format it and then bring it offline so that the cluster can hold it. So I'm going to right click, bring this offline, right click, bring this offline, right click, bring this offline. All right. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go to my next server in sequence 52. Open this thing up and do the same thing. Go to the iSCSI initiator and connect to those disks. Click on Tools, iSCSI initiator, say yes to start the service, and it should come up here very soon. There you go. Point to the iSCSI target server, which is my domain controller. Quick connect. Connect that. Connect that. Connect that. Click Done. Click OK. Go to my Tools and Computer Management and take a look to see that the disks are there and that they are offline. Can't have them online because cluster will not be able to manage it or use it, which is no good. So there you go. There they are. Disk 2, 3, 4, 20 gig, 40 gig, and 1 gig. Okay, so all done there. Let me see where my 62 box is. And I'm going to use another account. And click. Here it is coming in. And I need to insert this one into the domain controller. Right? I need to insert this into the domain controller. Server Manager. And once I insert it into the domain controller, I am going to be ready to join what I do here. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see how I can do this. Bold fonts, make it a little bit bigger. There we go. So I do netdom join this computer to the class edu domain using the username administrator and using the password and done. Restart it. Once this restarts, I'm going to be inside of the domain. Okay, so in the meantime, I have this machine, these two, host 1 and host 2. I've got them inside of a, I've got the storage devices connected to this. The next thing I need to do is I need to go to failover cluster manager right here. And failover cluster manager requires that I validate the cluster with all of the hosts that I have. And the process takes a little bit of time. And let me bring up the validate configuration right here. And it's going to bring up a wizard. There it is. And I'm going to wait for this box to show up. And I'm going to connect to the server. It's not up yet. It's still coming up. Since I joined it to the domain, it's taking a few minutes. Okay. Validating the cluster, what it does is it checks to see how many. It checks to see if you have all of the required components needed for the cluster to operate. Disk, network, redundancy, and of course communication, connectivity. Checks storage. It checks everything to make certain that you are able to gain access to the network. Okay, I'm going to use another account. Class, administrator. There it is getting in, really good sign. And I need to do the same thing on this box. I'm going to show you how I installed failover cluster. And I need to set some firewall settings here as well. I need to open it up. All right. So I'm going to do configure roles and features as soon as this thing is done. Come on. I'm letting it finish this little scrolling thing here. Okay. Add features, add roles and features. Click next, click next, click next. And I'm going to go right to, I'm going to click on Hyper-V. There it is right there. Click add features, and this takes time. All right. And I'm going to click next, and I'm going to install failover clustering as well. And I'm going to install Windows Standards-based storage management. Okay. Click next, make Ethernet my NIC for the purposes of VM traffic. I'm going to allow live migrations to occur on this box. Save the drives, restart as needed, say yes, click install, and off it goes. This is exactly what I did on the other two servers. Installed Hyper-V, installed a Windows Standards-based storage manager, and installed failover clustering. Let's go back here. So I'm going to click next, right there. I specify my two hosts that are going to serve, that are going to be part of my cluster, which is host 01 and host 02. There they are. I click next. Here are the list of tests that it runs, and the only one that I don't want to run is the multipath I/O test, this one right there. Okay. Everything else I want to run, and I want to see how well it responds. I'm going to click next, and it's going to give me a list, and I'm going to click next, and off it goes running the tests. And this takes some time. Right. Go to this box, and this is installing these features here. Installing the Hyper-V and failover clustering. There you go. Now it's restarting. So here it is. It's checking the disks, checking the iSCSI disk, and it's checking both hosts. I've got a gigabit bandwidth basically connected to the boxes, and a gigabit is required at the very minimum. And if anything changes in the cluster, like you add services and such, or you add network cards, you change the architecture, you have to go through and validate the cluster configuration all over again. That's a requirement. Once this is done validating, it's going to prompt me to create the cluster. Or it's going to say, hey, you've got errors and you can't create the cluster until you fix the errors. As long as there are warnings, it will let me go through. So let's see what's going on here. This takes a while. I don't think this is going to connect just yet. It's probably still configuring Hyper-V. Let's take a look. Let's go to my Dell Remote Access Controller for this box. There it is, root. Put in my password, go to my console, open my console, check to see, there you go, it's restarting already, so that's good. It configured Hyper-V, it configured failover cluster, it is already in the domain, and it already restarted. So far so good. Notice a whole bunch of tests passed. And that's a very good sign that the disk tests passed and system tests passed. It's got a bunch of other stuff. I don't really know what order it does this stuff in. I really don't have any clue if... I'm sure there's a method to its madness. But disk test takes the longest amount of time. Here it is doing the network test, checking redundancy. It wants a minimum of 2 NICs, and it wants 2 networks basically on different subnets. So if you have 2 NICs on the same subnet, it'll give you an error. Okay, so this is, it said, hey, it completed with a warning, and it's saying you must run all tests or whatever. but I don't really care about that because it's really referring to the MPIO. If I go to view the report, it'll open up this browser and opens up this report, and you'll see the Hyper-V configuration, inventory, network storage, and system configuration all passed. Otherwise, it would show errors here that I would have to attend to. The only test that I did not do was the MPIO test, the multipath IO test, which for my purposes I don't need. And then it gives details on everything that it did and whatever. So I don't care about that. I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to click Finish. And I said, create the cluster now using validated nodes. And I can do the same thing with my third box, but I'm just going to click Finish here. Here's a cluster. Don't show this again. Click Next. Cluster name. I'm going to call this thing. Main cluster. Assign an IP address to this thing, 192.168.1.99. Click Next. It validates to see that the IP address is okay. Add eligible storage to the cluster. Click Next. Right-click on 6 here. Connect the server. Another account. Log into that box. And here I am on this machine. It created the Hyper-V and everything, and rock and roll in here. So it created the cluster. Click Finish. And come on. Right here it's going to populate the name of the cluster. There it is. Main cluster. Expand. Go to nodes. Here are my 2 hosts. All right. Go over to disks. Right, here are my 3 disks. Now I've got disk 2 and disk 3 available as available storage. I'm going to go over here on the right-hand side. I'm going to change this. I'm going to add this to cluster shared volumes, just like that. Go over here, make this add cluster shared volume so that I can actually use it. Without making it a cluster shared volume, I cannot use these disks to place shared resources on. Here's my 1 gig disk, which is the smallest one that it's using as a witness disk. And I've got these 2 disks available. If I open up Windows File Explorer, Folder Explorer, go to Computer, C drive, it created this cluster storage folder. And in it, I've got Volume 1 and Volume 2, which are pointing to the, well, essentially the cluster storage, the shared cluster storage. And it has done that on both servers, 42 and 52. Let me minimize this. Click over here. Go to the C drive, cluster storage. Here's Volume 1 and Volume 2 that is being shared by the cluster. Right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to roles. I have no roles right now. I'm going to right-click. I'm going to right-click on roles and select virtual machines, new virtual machine on host 01, and click OK.